An emotional exit. The British Prime Minister says she's stepping down next month. Who'll take her place? And is Brexit breaking apart the UK's Conservative Party? I'm Imran Garda, and today's newsmaker is Theresa May's departure. Brexit is living up to its reputation as a poisoned chalice. It brought down David Cameron, who first made Brexit a possibility. And now it's taken out the Prime Minister who tried to make it happen. Theresa May did all she could to get her withdrawal agreement through Parliament, but MPs rejected it every time. That failure ultimately led to her downfall. And the battle for the next Conservative leader is already in full swing. Several candidates have thrown their hats into the ring, including former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. The hard Brexiteer resigned from May's cabinet last year over her handling of Brexit. Now he's blaming the party's failure to get the UK out of the EU as the reason why the Conservatives performed so poorly in the European elections. Is he right? Have the Tories lost the trust of the kingdom, and can they get it back? Haider Abbasi reports.
I will shortly leave the job that it has been the honour of my life to hold. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
Brexit has defeated another Prime Minister. Theresa May was in office for less than 3 years. It was a time dominated by crisis. Critics aren't surprised by her decision, only that she didn't quit sooner.
Never forget that compromise is not a dirty word. Life depends on compromise.
But it was because May didn't secure compromise that she failed to deliver Brexit. Analysts say she should have reached out to so-called Remainers early in her premiership. She only did this in the last few months, and that effort failed. May faced humiliation after humiliation. Her Conservative Party lost its majority in Parliament after she called a snap election in 2017. And the withdrawal deal she negotiated with the European Union was voted down not once, but 3 times. Although Theresa May is leaving, the problem of Britain leaving the EU remains. There are a bunch of politicians eager to replace May, but the favourite is Boris Johnson. Britain's former Foreign Secretary is seen by some as divisive and dangerous, and he's pushing for a no-deal Brexit.
So I think Brexit is unstoppable, as Helmut Kohl used to say of the process of European Union, is unumstoßbar. It will go on.
Politicians are worried about how this could affect the UK's economy. According to the investment bank Goldman Sachs, Britain's economy has lost $760 million a week since the referendum in 2016. That's 2.5% of the UK's GDP. And a study by the Bertelsmann Foundation says if Britain exits the EU without a deal, the cost to the economy would be around $60 billion a year. Europe would also suffer losses as a result. But passing a no-deal Brexit might not be easy for Johnson. Senior Tories say they'll oppose any Prime Minister that tries to pursue a no-deal. This could lead to a vote of no confidence and a general election. It seems Britain's Parliament is as polarised as the public on Brexit. A new Prime Minister will be chosen in July. This will give the new leader only a few months to solve the crisis, as Britain is scheduled to exit the EU on October 31st. Will the Conservative Party survive the next few months, or will there be another party that will navigate Britain through its EU divorce? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Let's go to London now, where I'm joined by Patrick Loughlin. He's the national organizer for the campaign group Conservatives for a People's Vote. Bilal Mahmood is a former parliamentary candidate for Labour and is now the vice chair of Labour in the City, a social group for Labour members and supporters. And Roger Alton is a journalist and contributing editor at the Daily Mail. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us. Roger, let me start with you. Was Theresa May a failure?
Well, I don't think she's been a great success. I think she did a lot of slightly admirable things pressing on, but I don't think she's going to be remembered as one of the great prime ministers. I mean, she had to refer to various achievements, a bit about plastic straws and a little bit about instituting an inquiry into Grenfell, which hardly count as great achievements. I mean, anybody would have instituted an inquiry into Grenfell. I think she was dealt an impossible hand, which she then didn't play very well.
Patrick, has Brexit, in a way, done a lot of damage to the Tories?
Absolutely. It's done a lot of damage to the country and to the Conservative Party. We saw with the resignation of the Prime Minister, she was dealt an impossible card, as Roger just said. And there really is no, I cannot see any way she could have done much better, except possibly earlier on by reaching out to the other side, by talking to the other parties, because we have to remember that Brexit was not just a vote from the Conservative Party, but from people from all kind of parties across the country.
Bilal, when we look at what comes next,
to do that.
Certainly, Bilal, when we look at what comes next, it's not just about who becomes the next Prime Minister, but it's also about who gets to choose who becomes the next Prime Minister, and that's happening within a very ring-fenced Tory party, right? So when I give you some names, Bilal, Andrea Leadsom, Dominic Raab, Penny Mordaunt, Michael Gove, Jeremy Hunt, Matt Hancock, Rory Stewart, Sajid Javid, Boris Johnson, any of these names excite you as potentially your next Prime Minister?
In a word, no. I think that these are difficult times without these strange circumstances occurring. But I think that the nature of the parliamentary system in the UK means that with the Conservative Party, the Tory MPs will be responsible for shortlisting their candidates for the wider membership of the Conservative Party to choose who is our eventual Prime Minister. Conventionally, one would think that a general election should follow to allow that leader to be endorsed by the public.
Is that a natural progression, given the chaos? Certainly, Roger, given the chaos of the past 3 years, many people saying waste of money, waste of time, waste of energy, we need a fresh general election after Theresa May goes. Is that a fair argument, Roger?
I think it's a very fair argument. The point is, as the other speakers have said, the next Prime Minister is essentially going to be appointed by 100,000 members of the Conservative Party. It's an appointment. It's not an election. It's tremendously undemocratic. So this small group of people, largely elderly, even older than I am, are going to be appointing the next leader of this country. It seems to me grossly weird, and I think there's a constitutional deficit involved. So the next Prime Minister, the next Tory leader, will come in looking after a House of Commons where you haven't got a majority, where you're having to deal with an issue which has been rejected time after time after time after time. And there is a serious problem about how you're supposed to rule. So I think you have to have a general election. If I was the Queen, and obviously I'd like to be, but if I was the Queen, I should be perfectly entitled to say, are you sure you can run the country, old chap? Maybe have a general election.
Okay, so Patrick, if this goes according to plan, the 120,000 or so Tories, if they choose the best candidate based on who's available, it could be quite likely that that would be Boris Johnson. He's perfectly placed as a Tory. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, it could be Boris Johnson. Whoever it is going to be, it is likely to be somebody who's pandering to the membership. As Roger just said, we've done 100,000 or so Conservative Party members, most of whom are quite elderly. And they are the ones having a say. And among the membership, we've also had infiltration from UKIP. And so there's a very big group who really want to have a no deal within the membership. And that does not reflect the wishes of the average voter, as we saw with these European elections, for example. We saw that there's a big loss from the Conservative votes towards the Remain parties. And this creates a situation where I really do not see that the Conservative Party will be electable if it goes with a hard Brexit candidates. So I would love to avoid a general election at all costs.
Right. Patrick?
I think a second referendum is a much more, preferred outcome to option for dealing with this.
Right. Writing in the Telegraph, Patrick, Boris Johnson saying the message of the European election results is clear. If we go on like this, we will be dismissed. After these dismal elections, we need a proper Brexit and a fresh agenda to reunite the country. Patrick, is that Boris just being opportunistic, or does he have a point?
I think that is Boris just playing to the membership. All the candidates are playing to the membership. But what we have seen with the results last night is that the membership is they have different wishes to the Conservative voter. So we must also think about how the party reaches out to its lost voter base. With its aging membership, aging support base, it really needs to start reaching out to younger people. It's lost business support. It's losing the support of ethnic minorities. So I would like to see a candidate who can have such a vision, who can build a better, who can promising better for the future for our party and for our country.
Bilal, has Corbyn been the right guy at the wheel, given that the Tories have self-imploded over the past few months with every single vote that got rejected, that May had tabled in Parliament and so on? Is Corbyn the right guy to capitalise on that for Labour?
Certainly, I think all major parties last night suffered losses that they hadn't expected, and that was unfortunate. But it seems to be that Brexit has taken on a life of its own and has expanded beyond the traditional party stance. What I would say, just on the just to go back on the membership of the Conservative Party, is that regardless of their demographic, one of Theresa May's legacies for the past 2 years is that she has been trying to sell a form of Brexit that is painless, that is free, and that does everything we want and is totally one-sided. And because of that, it has engendered a sense of impossibility, that there is no real way to deliver the Brexit that Theresa May promised and who her successor will undoubtedly try and claim to be able to do. And so the real problem that we're facing is not just the types of people who are selecting this candidate, but what this candidate will be selling. And so that's the first point. Moving on to what Jeremy Corbyn could be doing. Look, I think Labour had a difficult life last night. We are more so now, I think, than maybe the Conservative Party, faced with a difficult situation as to where we stand on not just the referendum, but as a party of Remain and Reform or as a leaving party. That's because of the nature of our demographics as traditional voters, whether they be in cities or they're in the northeast. And it requires a lot of soul-searching for us, and I think we do need to find more of a clearer voice as to where we stand on this. But the wider point is that Brexit is beyond almost a policy debate anymore. It's a value debate. It's about what type of world we want to live in. And people have been, for the past 2 years, sold a Brexit that has become more and more impossible, that the divide between the two sides has become, the gap has become almost unbridgeable. And I think we're in a more difficult place now than we were at the day after the referendum.
Roger Alton, has the gap become unbridgeable? Is the country as divided as it ever has been?
It's the most disunited. We are the disunited kingdom. You can't really imagine anything quite as divided as we are. And look at Scotland, for example, where the which has obviously voted to stay, Brexit and UKIP polled very, very, very low, about I think 18 to 20% in Scotland. The rest will all remain. So if we press ahead with this, so other speakers have very cogently argued, with a harsh red meat type Brexit promised by Nigel Farage on the one hand, and by implication Boris, though I sort of somehow doubt it, but he's seen as the sort of red meat, hard, no deal, let's get out and sail on the high seas of freedom. Fat chance and good luck with that. I think it has to be something much more centrist, much more restrained. I hope Jeremy Hunt. The other alternative, it seems to me, is you have a general election and you possibly move towards revoking, because at some point, I think that's what will have to happen. We've made no progress. We're bitterly divided. It has become, in a sense, of value. Brexit defines the sort of person you are, and if we can revoke, then maybe we can start to get back together.
So, Patrick, the ideal scenario for you...
difficult,
sorry, Bilal, we're bringing you in a second, Bilal. Patrick, would the ideal scenario for you be a general election and a people's vote on Brexit at the same time, get it all sorted out once and for all?
No, I think I would like to avoid a general election. We've got enough problems as it is at the moment. I think there is a need for a second referendum, or rather a confirmatory referendum of whatever the government comes up with. We need to, because the issue is not just do we have Brexit, it's actually what kind of Brexit do we have? And who decides what that Brexit is? What is clear is that what people were promised in 2016, that is not on offer. I mean, people also imagined their own fantasy versions of what could happen with Brexit. And we need something that is clearly defined, that is deliverable, and that needs to be run past the people. And I think a general election is not in the interest of the country or the two major parties who are suffering because they have basically gone for a compromise which is unpopular with the electorate, and everything's quite distorted. I would just love to see clarity on the Brexit question so we can go beyond that. I think that's the most important thing. We need to get this Brexit out of the way to get back to normal politics and deal with the things that really matter in this country.
Bilal, would you accept that? A people's vote or a confirmatory referendum, whatever you want to call it, but no general election and the Tories still in charge?
So the Labour Party policy has been that they seek a general election first, and failing that, if they're not able to achieve that, that they seek a second vote or a confirmatory vote. My personal opinion is, I think I agree largely with the other speakers, is that the nature of Brexit has required that a form of confirmatory vote or a people's vote is almost a necessity. More than just answering the question of Brexit, it perhaps provides some form of finality. Just on the way here, listening to the radio, you hear people who were hugely in favour of Brexit and want to do so. A lot of these people feel that the only reason why they haven't achieved, in some cases, the fantasy idea of what Brexit is through conspiracy or incompetence. And I think that a chance of having a confirmatory vote of people's choice where there is a clear option, there is a definable, tangible form of what Brexit would look like, versus the alternative, which is the status quo, something like that on offer allows people's minds to focus. And I think that's the key about the reason why people will be supportive around a people's vote.
Roger Alton, let me ask you the big picture question. You've been around for a long time.
Sorry.
Where did it all go wrong?
Well, I'm pro-European. I think Europe is a rather good thing. So, but there's a huge minority in this country. I would have said roughly maybe a third, maybe a little bit more, who don't like Europe and will sort of never like Europe, will never come round to that idea. They believe in British exceptionalism, like to quote the Second World War, and so on and so forth. So whether that gap is bridgeable, whereas I think we should be an outward-looking country, open to foreign influences, foreign ideas. And of course, Europe itself is falling prey to these insular, slightly xenophobic tendencies, as was shown in the vote yesterday. I hope it hasn't gone wrong for good. I really hope it hasn't gone wrong for good, because this is, I think, these the strength lies in togetherness, and strength lies in being open-minded and outward-looking. I'd be very wary about a second vote, a people's referendum again, because it didn't do very well the first time.
And just as I wrap up, Patrick, are you going to miss Theresa May?
Well, I would love to say yes, but I think the whole country is tired of her. She did try her best, but I was upset to see how upset she was the other day, but I won't miss her.
Bilal Mahmood, are you going to miss her? Presumably not.
I think a lot of people were talking about how she was dealt a bad hand and how she had some of the most difficult circumstances in recent memory. Let's remember, she chose that. She put her name up to be Prime Minister during Brexit. She was fully aware of what was happening. And I think, as Roger spoke about earlier, she had ample opportunity to create more of a conciliatory effort of understanding how to negotiate with the European Union. What I think her legacy, notwithstanding things like Grenfell and also Windrush, which we haven't talked about here, has been creating a sense for Brexiteers that there is this free, perfect form of Brexit that exists, and the only thing that's stopping it are politicians. And the truth is to create that form of Brexit doesn't exist and creates such divisions within our society. Absolutely. To try and achieve that. It's making life and societies in Britain far worse. I think very briefly the question of where did this all begin? I think this is beyond Brexit. This is about fundamentally a sense of otherness, a sense of what do we see our society to be, and many people feeling that they couldn't speak out on issues, whether it be immigration, whether it be about equality, whether it be about integration. And I think over the past decades, certain people have felt life slip away from them, or the way that they see Britain slip away from them, and it has caused a form of discord. And I think the key about this, regardless of how Brexit ends up, is about building another sense of the British identity, where we belong in the world, what we look like, what we sound like. Because I think until that's resolved, we are always going to have a form of a permutation of the nastiness that Brexit has formed. Okay, building a better sense of a British identity. That's beyond the scope of my program, and I've got to wrap. But gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you all on. Patrick Loughlin, Bilal Mahmood and Roger Alton. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Still to come, India hands Narendra Modi a massive mandate as his ruling party is re-elected in a landslide. We ask if this is a ringing endorsement of Hindu nationalism and why the opposition crumbled. And this Palestinian politician has negotiated with American presidents. So why did the United States reject her visa? We ask Hanan Ashrawi if she thinks the decision to keep her out was political. It took 6 weeks for more than 600 million people to vote in India's election, the largest democratic exercise on the planet. The winner by a landslide was Narendra Modi. His ruling BJP picked up more than 300 seats in parliament, demolishing his rivals. In fact, the main opposition party, Indian National Congress, won barely 50 seats, suffering its second worst defeat in history. And if that wasn't humiliating enough, their leader Rahul Gandhi lost his own seat. So, what's behind Modi's monumental win? And what will he do with his historic mandate? Abu Bakr Shamahi takes a look.
Five more years in power for Narendra Modi, and 5 more years to mould India in the image of his party, the BJP. The Indian Prime Minister has increased his majority in Parliament. 270 million people have voted for the BJP and its allies. If Modi is to be believed, his success is because he's a man of the people. He's risen from poverty, a former tea seller, to become the leader of the biggest democracy in the world.
अगर कोई विजयी हुआ है, तो हिंदुस्तान विजयी हुआ है। अगर कोई विजयी हुआ है, तो लोकतंत्र विजयी हुआ है। अगर कोई विजयी हुआ है, तो जनता जनार्दन विजयी हुई है।
But this victory was far from certain. Modi had pledged to work for India's poor. But the economy has been sluggish over the past few years, and Modi struggled in December's state elections. Then in February, an attack on Indian security forces in Kashmir triggered a new wave of nationalism. And the threat of war with Pakistan seemed to give the BJP a bump in the polls. Supporters see Modi as a strong leader who can turn India into a global power. Yet his Hindu nationalist ideology leaves 200 million Muslims wary, especially after an increase in sectarian attacks. And India's liberals are left wondering whether their country is moving away from the secular ideals it was founded upon. It's been a long way down for the once dominant Indian National Congress. It's taken another battering at the polls, despite hopes this election may have returned the party to power. Congress barely improved on its 2014 performance, winning 52 seats to the BJP's 303.
There are two different ideologies and visions. One is that of Narendra Modi and the BJP, the other is that of the Congress party. However, we have to accept that Narendra Modi and the BJP have won this election, so I congratulate them.
Congress will now have to dissect the results and figure out a way to reverse them. but that may involve tough decisions, like breaking up the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty that's dominated the party since India's independence in 1947. Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has lost a seat both his parents held, and it may be time for him to acknowledge that his family prestige isn't what India wants in the future. Abu Bakr al-Shamahi, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from New Delhi is Sudesh Varma. He's a spokesman for the ruling BJP. In Mumbai is the opposition Congress Party's national spokesman Sanjay Jha. And also in Mumbai is journalist and author Rana Ayub. I thank you all for joining us. Sudesh, tell me why the BJP did so well. What was the secret to your success?
Of course, the performance of our government in the last 5 years and the kind of good governance we have taken in terms of statistics. If I start telling you that actually the poor man in this country got the benefits of the policies of this government. So we saw in this election that people had become campaigner. They were much ahead of the party or the party workers, and they were scared that if Narendra Modi doesn't come to power, what is going to happen to this country? So initially they started campaigning, and that explains that why we got such a huge victory, which opposition in this country and even some of the media critics were not ready to believe. But we had seen that, we had seen that when we went to campaign, we could see a lot of women coming out and lining up. When you ask them, they would say just Modi, Modi, and also the youngsters, So Modi was seen as a solution. The opposition was always trying to point towards the problems. Problems fine, but it was not because of Modi's doing. So the solution they saw in Modi, and that is the result that they wanted to give this government another chance with much greater majority and much more power to deliver the goods.
Sanjay Jha, for the past couple of years, Congress has been saying that the BJP has failed in governance. Well, the people have answered now. They believe that the past 5 years have been good enough to give the BJP another mandate. Is this egg on the face of Congress?
Well, I must be honest and tell you that we have been astonished by the result. It's not just the scale. Frankly speaking, we were very confident that Narendra Modi and the BJP will be defeated because fundamentally they have been a monumental failure. How do you evaluate a government's performance? Now, my BJP counterpart said that we performed brilliantly. Well, if you look at the numbers on the critical economic factors, which are jobs, rural distress, the private capital investment, the state of the institutions in our country, which are totally politically manipulated, attacks on the minorities and particularly the Muslims who have been brutally lynched. I read a report that 47 were killed since Mr. Narendra Modi became Prime Minister. You have had the Dalits, which are, other vulnerable sections of our society.
But fair enough.
Who have been brutalized.
Sanjay, let me come in here for a second. Why were you not able, sorry to interrupt you, why were you not able to make this argument to the voters? Because the voters don't agree with you. The voters have chosen the BJP for another 5-year mandate. This was a free and fair election. Why didn't Congress and Rahul Gandhi make this argument to the people and convince them over the past year?
Well, I'll answer that. I mean, I was going to add just one more point that there was a direct corruption scandal where we felt Narendra Modi had a lot to answer to the people of India. So why did we believe the people probably go with the BJP? I believe the principal reason behind that are actually twofold. Number one, that Mr. Modi played the hyper-nationalism card after the Pulwama terror attack and the counter-strike by India in Balakot in Pakistan. And he also played the traditional BJP strategy of communal polarization. Narendra Modi talked about, the constituency from where Mr. Rahul Gandhi was fighting and, brought in this Hindu majority, Hindu minority. And thereafter, everybody in the BJP started singing the same tune. So it's a combination of what can be described as muscular nationalism and very aggressive Hindutva campaign. So he is won not for performance, but because he's actually played with the emotions of the majority community in our country.
Rana Ayub, was it more a case of the BJP doing spectacularly well or Congress doing spectacularly badly?
I think it's a mixture of both. And journalists like us who have been reporting from the ground had predicted this result more than a month ago, of course, which Congress did not agree with at that point of time. Colossal, the kind of campaigning that was done by the Congress. I think, one, it did not resonate with the rural India. I mean, one of the biggest issues that they made was the corruption deal of the Rafale defense deal. When I met people on the ground in rural India, it's not an issue that stuck with them. They said it's a rich man's issue. So somewhere the Congress failed to, kind of understand the issues of rural India, which is a majority, issues that really work for the Indian population. What worked for the BJP, this was an election which was fought on a majoritarian ground, on hyper-nationalism. They launched a hyper-nationalist blitzkrieg. The ruling party president referred to Muslims as termites and infiltrators who need to be thrown in the Bay of Bengal. There are lynchings. A week before elections, Mr. Narendra Modi inducted and got Sadhvi Pragya Thakur, a criminal who has been charged with terror attacks on Muslims. She was inducted and she's now in the Indian Parliament. With that kind of aggressive hyper-nationalist campaign and majoritarian campaign, I think that stuck on the ground, and that's why this resounding victory.
Okay, so Sudesh Verma, just trying to address some of these issues. The woman mentioned Sadhvi Pragya Thakur, who called Mahatma Gandhi's assassin a hero and a patriot, a Desh Bhakti. Nathuram Godse was a Desh Bhakti, is a Desh Bhakti, and will remain a Desh Bhakti. So all of this in mind, what we heard from Sanjay and Rana over the past few minutes, people being lynched, especially Muslims, on the allegation of eating beef, this Hindu majoritarianism at the expense of minorities. Are we just going to expect more and more of this over the next 5 years?
You see, those who are aware of Indian politics would know that to call Rana Ayub has used the word criminal for Sadhvi Pragya, which is wrong. Makoka that was imposed was taken off, and it was a vendetta politics of the Congress that tried to fix Sadhvi Pragya in a case she was not involved. And we firmly believe that it was because... Please, can I answer, Rana Ayub? Can I answer, Rana Ayub? I know you stand. Let me answer. Let me give my version. Or you want to give your version and confuse the people. And you see, Sadhvi Pragya for us represented a symbol where she was actually terrorized because she represented Hindus, and Hindu terror was squandered. So it was actually a fight against that. And whatever rights Sadhvi Pragya has, others also have. She has not been indicted by any court. So you cannot have different standards for different people.
So let's put that aside for a second. She's awaiting trial in the 2008 terrorism attack. Okay, Sudesh, just a second. So, okay, she's awaiting trial for a terrorism attack for 2008. Let's put that aside. Let's put that aside. Sudesh, she's calling. If we can say,
you see, 1984 riots, people were charged with creating riots, but they still contested elections.
I'd love for you to answer this, right? Put that aside. Put the charges aside. The fact that she was calling Gandhi's assassin a hero and a patriot, you accept that? You agree with it? You find that okay that she's in the Lok Sabha representing Bhopal?
Not at all. You must be knowing that the party has distanced, the party forced her to retract and say sorry. She jumped the gun.
But
the party cannot subscribe to those kinds of values. Here is the Prime Minister who...
What does it tell us about this government and this party?
Okay, now I'll come to the criticism. Now I'll come to what Sanjay Jha said. You see, still if you continue with the narrative that people did not find resonance with, then I'm sorry, nobody can help the Congress. It is not majoritarian. And let me tell you with the statistics that Muslim-dominated constituencies, BJP has won, where Muslims were the decisive factor. It is actually a vote that cannot be called a majoritarian versus minorities. No, it's not that. And we have won in all places. It's not a lie, it's the fact, it's statistics. And you have seen what Modi ji has said, what the Prime Minister has said. Nobody should try to create fears. And that is the kind of people that Mr. Rahul Gandhi should be aware of. People like Sanjay Jha and Rana Ayub try to poison the mind of people and try to project as anti-minority. We are not anti-minority. The Prime Minister has clarified, please don't create this image.
Okay, the internet doesn't forget. So when this is uploaded, we're going to fact check this, and in the description we'll have a look at the statistics. You claim that Muslims have voted for the BJP more than they voted for Congress. Let's put that aside for a second. Yes. Sanjay, I want to look inward now at Congress. I mean, Congress is messed up, right? Congress was expecting to win. We saw Rahul Gandhi completely deflated. Is this now time for Congress to move beyond the Nehru-Gandhi dynasties and all of that symbolism and try something new, because you've messed up this election in a terrible way?
Well, I can tell you that we will definitely do a very rigorous self-examination to find out as to why did we allow Narendra Modi and the BJP to, kind of polarize this country, which was on predictable lines. And we should have had maybe a counter-attack to, the attempt to create this whole pseudo-nationalistic, kind of appeal. The truth is, however, in retrospect, what we believe, and we were very confident, I'll tell you that India will never subscribe to the ugly rhetoric of Nathuram Godse's violent assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. I mean, this is a country that inspired Martin Luther King, and I mean, Gandhi's influenced many world leaders. So we were very confident that India's ethos will never be, ultimately compromised by no matter how aggressive the propaganda the BJP did. But I agree with you. We have to probably redo our entire political strategy. I do want to, however, say one point that there is a current wave of, these nationalistic authoritarian leaders. We saw it happen in Australia as well, where a government that was expected to lose suddenly won. And I think there has been this global tendency where more right-wing fundamentalism seems to have caught the public imagination. But that's no excuse. And I do believe India is a democracy. India is a secular liberal democracy. And the Congress party will fight tooth and nail to preserve it.
Right. And the experts are prone to getting it really wrong recently. We saw, I think, the New York Times saying that there was a 90% chance that Hillary Clinton would win the US elections. Rana Ayub, as we look at what drove Indian voters to go for the BJP again with a bigger mandate, as unpalatable as you might find the populism or the majoritarianism as you term it, is there an argument for the fact that Indian voters have just chosen stability? Does the BJP bring stability?
I don't think the BJP brings stability because we are staring at a 45-year high of unemployment. We are staring at our GDP being low. We are staring at agrarian distress, lack of economic reforms. But as journalists, when we do speak to people on the ground, their sentiment is, and that's a BJP slogan which has latched onto with the people. That is, if not Narendra Modi, then who? Clearly, Rahul Gandhi has not been a credible opposition. It's not an opposition that could face the charisma, the Hindu nationalistic charisma of Narendra Modi. The Balakot strikes helped, it was a very shot in the arm for Narendra Modi, who saw a dip in the popularity last year, but the hyper-nationalist blitzkrieg that he launched after the attack on Pakistan did help him. Having said that, Rahul Gandhi lost his own home bastion of Amethi. That says something about the Congress party as an opposition, because Congress party really needs to work and rejig its own internal organization. Otherwise, we are staring at the BJP being in power for the next 10 years if the Congress really does not do a check of its own organization instead of accusing the BJP.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So Gandhi lost his own seat in Amethi in Uttar Pradesh. He won another seat, so he's still in parliament, but he lost his own seat to Smriti Irani, which is fascinating in and of itself. Sudesh Verma, one of the big questions everybody's asking is, did you guys as the BJP drag the country towards the right, or have you done so well after 5 years because you've come more to the center?
You know, the more people like Mr. Sanjay Gha and Ms. Rana Ayub get us wrong, we are happy about it, because they would never be able to reach the truth. The truth is that it was a clash between two ideologies. One ideology that spoke about a strong country, a strong leader, and good delivery system, which we were trying to make. And the other was that sided with the Tukre gang that always spoke of India as a nation of nationalities. And they were completely outvoted because of this also. And if you ignore the vast number of people who have been beneficiary of the system created by Mr. Modi, then you are ignoring the very fact that Mr. Modi has delivered such a huge mandate. You did not get, despite the narrative by the Congress. You see, they tried to bring in corruption charges. It was investigated by the court, had seen that, did not find anything. We replied in Parliament every time. But you kept on abusing the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister represents all people of this country. So this would not go well. This negative campaign is not going to work in this country. On the other hand, Mr. Modi is with a positive agenda for change, positive agenda for taking the country to newer heights, to take its rightful place in the Committee of Nations. So naturally, the people had a clear choice.
Sanjay Jha, your response?
Well, you know, I just want to let you know that ever since Mr. Modi's become the Prime Minister, the RSS is literally running this government. I mean, this government actually goes and gives a performance appraisal report to Mr. Mohan Bhagwat, who heads the RSS. I mean, you know, the truth is there have been 47 lynching deaths. There is the UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath, who's made some of the most horrific statements against India's minorities. And every other day, it's not just lynching violence, it's also the fact that if anybody is actually critical of this government, they are told to go to Pakistan. Look at the terrible mismanagement of Kashmir, which has become a tinderbox, but the BJP has actually used Kashmir as some kind of a laboratory experiment for further domestic polarization. So I think the BJP has, frankly speaking, played all its trump cards. And, you know, in our opinion, it's been totally contrarian to the spirit of the Indian Constitution. Mr. Modi's taken an oath on the Indian Constitution to be equal, to be fair, and to be secular towards each and every religion, but that hasn't happened. So the truth is we are at the moment, I think, facing a pretty dark and a dismal democratic future. But, you know, as an opposition party that has been in government for 55 years, we are wedded to, you know, putting our best foot forward. Mr. Rahul Gandhi said that this election is for the soul of India. This is like the second freedom struggle after the way we battled against the British, because there is a policy of divide and rule which is being practiced by the BJP. But we will stand tall, we'll fight it, and we are very confident we'll turn it around.
Rana Ayub, very finely, if this was a clash between two very different ideologies, what are the next 5 years going to look like under Modi's leadership?
Well, Imran, certainly for the minorities, the last 5 years has been a nightmare, whether it's a Muslim minority or the Dalits or the lower caste or for the Christian minorities. I mean, about 3 days ago, the Prime Minister of the country gave a speech where he spoke about inclusive development, about taking minorities together. And since 23rd May, there have been 3 hate crimes against Muslims. One has been lynched on allegation of beef consumption. Another Muslim has been, a couple has been asked to chant Jai Shri Ram, and they were beaten on the streets. So the Prime Minister's speech seems hollow and empty words as long as there's nothing on the ground, as long as its cadres and leaders stop this provocation and stop this hate on the ground. I think the next 5 years will certainly be a testing time for the Indian democracy and its soul, as Sanjay said. And it will also be a test for where this country goes in the near future and its inclusive democracy.
Sudesh Verma, Sanjay Jha, and Rana Ayub, I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers.
The United States will always stand with our friend and ally Israel. And today, reflecting congressional concern with Palestinian attempts to prompt an ICC investigation of Israel, the Department of State will announce the closure of the Palestine Liberation Organization office here in Washington, D.C.
The Washington office of the Palestine Liberation Organization served as a de facto Palestinian diplomatic mission in the U.S. Capitol. Last year, the Trump administration shut it down. Now the government has denied a U.S. travel visa to a senior PLO executive. Hanan Ashrawi has negotiated with U.S. secretaries of state and met several presidents. So the decision earlier this month to bar her entry to the United States for the first time came as quite a surprise. But many see it fitting a pattern of Trump forging stronger ties with Israel at the expense of the Palestinians. So why was she refused entry? Well, let's ask Hanan Ashrawi herself. She's a PLO executive, a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council, and among the most prominent figures in Palestinian politics today. She joins us now from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Good to talk to you once again. Ma'am, why do you think they rejected your visa?
Well, the most obvious reason is, of course, political, and it is rather petty and vindictive in the sense that they don't like my statements or positions critical of the American policies and this administration's policies and unilateral illegal actions. This is one. But basically, as you said, it is part of a pattern. It comes in the wake of a long series of actions that are extremely prejudicial, starting with Jerusalem, in the sense that they recognized Israel's illegal annexation of Jerusalem and moved the American embassy there. And then they moved to target the Palestinian refugees and UNRWA, which is the international agency entrusted with the well-being and rights of the Palestinian refugees. Then they defunded all of Palestinian projects, whether infrastructure or hospitals in Jerusalem or even scholarships. And then they refused to acknowledge the two-state solution. They refused to describe the settlements as illegal. They closed down our office in Washington. They closed down the Consulate General in the American Consulate General in Jerusalem, which was supposed to serve the Palestinians since 1844. This is part of our history, and it's a diplomatic representation to the Palestinians. And they moved ahead with several other steps, which meant that this administration has waged an unrelenting or relentless war against the Palestinians, whether it's economic or whether it's political and diplomatic, and they targeted us collectively and individually. It's very petty, and it's rather, in many ways, the denial of my visa is rather childish, I think.
Right. The U.S. Embassy says that visa records are confidential under U.S. law, therefore we cannot discuss the details of individual visa cases. So they're not saying why. Interestingly enough, a month ago, I had a conversation with Omar Barghouti, who also was denied a visa to the U.S. Now, interestingly, he's a BDS founder. He calls for one state. You're a big supporter of the two-state solution. So on both ends of the kind of Palestinian political spectrum, both denied entry to the U.S. What does that tell you about the way they see all Palestinian attempts at peace and justice?
I think they look at us as guilty by virtue of our identity. They're guilty because we're guilty because we refuse to succumb, we refuse to surrender. There is this mentality in this U.S. administration that seems to want the Palestinians to admit and internalize a sense of defeat. They kept saying, you're defeated, that the Palestinians are defeated and they have to accept this, and therefore they have to accept our version of what peace is going to be like, which is peace that means Palestinian capitulation and dealing only with economic integration, making Israel part of the region, and at the same time improving the quality of life of Palestinians while under occupation. So all this is part of a mentality and a policy that follows the dictates or the priorities of the extreme right-wing government in Israel, and of course of the donors, funders, and the base of the Trump administration, whether it's in the extreme ideological Christian Zionists, the evangelicals, or whether it is in the donors like Sheldon Adelson and others, or whether it is the extreme Zionist organizations like AIPAC and others. So we see ourselves, in a sense, having to deal with an American administration that has adopted the most extreme ideological position in favor of Israel, that has become complicit with the Israeli occupation, and that is targeting the Palestinians in order to force a solution that has nothing to do with justice, with international law, or with even any claim to permanence or justice, as I said.
I have a little surprise for you. Exactly 10 years ago, we spoke on a different network on Al Jazeera, and I asked you about Barack Obama, who was just getting his feet under the desk as the US president at that time. And I asked you about your hopes and aspirations when it came to Barack Obama. Have a little listen to what you had to say to me.
The most encouraging sign is that Barack Obama does not have the ideological dimension that characterized the Bush administration, number one. Number two, he does not have to be educated on the issue. He knows the issue. Three, he has a good team. The first positive sign was also the appointment of George Mitchell, who knows the situation, who is a peacemaker, who's somebody who is respected and has the confidence of the political establishment as well.
You were encouraged. Now, in hindsight, you didn't get a lot out of the Obama administration, right? And you were so optimistic about them. What does that tell you about? What does that tell you about what Palestinians are going to get out of the Trump administration now?
Look, frankly, no American administration has been even-handed in its dealings with the Palestinians. But at least they tried to maintain the pretense. I mean, there were certain red lines that they didn't cross. violations of international law, the question of the 67 borders, the ending of the occupation. These were all standard policy positions by different administrations. Barack Obama was put on the defensive immediately by the Israelis by claiming that, of course, his name is Barack Hussein Obama, so he will side with the Muslims, with the Arabs, with the Palestinians. And he spent the rest of his administration trying to prove that he was good for the Arabs, that he was good for Israel, that he was not biased. So he bent over backwards in order to please the Israelis. It was a major disappointment. Only until the last month, I think, of his administration did he take one step after being repeatedly humiliated and after Israel interfered in domestic American politics and after Netanyahu went to Congress and incited against him and incited Congress to vote against the JCPOA and other things. So anyway, in the end, ultimately, they took one decision in which they did not veto a resolution 2334, which is the only thing that the Obama administration in 8 years did to send a message that they respect international law. Now, this administration is much more dangerous in the sense that it has a total ideological identification with Israel, whether, as I said, on the fundamentalist religious side, whether Christian or Jewish, or whether it is on the side of people who are totally committed to Israel. He put together a team, starting with his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who has supported settlements, who was on a board of an organization to support the Israeli army. And David Friedman is the ambassador. He speaks in biblical terms, and of course, he's the one person who advocates for Israel constantly.
Right.
His envoy, Jason Greenblatt, who is constantly on Twitter,
right,
is the one person who also defends Israel and justifies whatever it does.
He has a go at you on
This
Twitter.
is different. Yes. This is not just collusion. They've become...
Right. And I'm sorry to interrupt you.
They've become partners in crime.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you because you mentioned Kushner. The Trump administration says Kushner and his team have a plan for you. They have the deal of the century in mind. From what you've heard of the details, are you interested in that at all?
Well, we are extremely concerned about what they call the deal of the century. They keep pushing it, they keep kicking the ball down the road, knowing that they are preventing anybody else from taking any kind of initiative by saying we have a plan and we'll announce it in due time. Number one. Number two, what they did actively on the ground in terms of unilateral and prejudicial measures betrays not just collusion, but as I said, a partnership in crime with the Israeli occupation, whether it's Jerusalem or the refugees or the settlements or whatever. So in a sense, they have enacted or attempted to enact parts of this deal, and these are the issues that are the core issues, the central issues, the key to a solution. And they have actually alienated not just all the Palestinians, but all Arabs and Muslims, particularly when it comes to Jerusalem, and of course all neighboring countries, because issues like borders and refugees affect the stability and security of neighboring countries, Arab host countries, and so on. And they moved ahead in ways that are, in a sense, antithetical to the requirements of peace. I said they have smashed the negotiating table to smithereens. There's nothing on that table. And then they're punishing us because we're not coming to a non-existent table. This is very strange. And the same thing now with this so-called workshop that they are holding in Manama and Bahrain. It's, again, another diversionary tactic in order to avoid dealing with the real issues, in order to avoid complying with international law and signed agreements, and in order to turn the question into how do we, give the Palestinians a handout while we continue to maintain Israel's control and Israel's occupation. And at the same time, how do we integrate Israel in the region? This is the dangerous part. They are putting the Arab Peace Initiative on its head, upside down, by saying that let's normalize with Israel, let's turn the real enemy as being Iran, and let's reintegrate the region with Israel as a major economic, political, security, military power in the region. This is the danger. It's not just the total disregard for Palestinian rights, but it is a very arrogant attempt at redefining the region as a whole.
Hanan Ashrawi, great to talk to you once again. Pleasure having you on the Newsmakers. And that's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, Eddie Gallagher is suspected of being a war criminal. So why is Donald Trump thinking about pardoning the former Navy SEAL? Until then, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.